Happy 4th of July, guys. Yeah, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm a pretty mediocre guitar player. But let's talk about vinyl records and songs that celebrate the 4th of July. I'll leave the Jimi Hendrix to the end. I was going to play a loud, raucous version of that, but my wife's trying to sleep in the other room. I was only going to play the first 2 bars anyway. Records for the 4th of July. How about one called The 4th of July by X? One of X's later records, kind of a little bit mellower than their earlier, punkier stuff. The song 4th of July, which is on here, is actually a song written by Dave Alvin, and I might like his version a little bit better than this one. They're both good. Dave's is a little mellower, slower, balladier. This one sounds more like a John Doe kind of a record. It's good. But hey, it's the only record I could think of called The 4th of July, on the 4th of July. Another word for 4th of July is, of course, Independence Day. And Elliott Smith, if you know him, he's got a song. Actually, my favorite Elliott Smith song is called Independence Day, and it's on this record, XO. Is that how you pronounce it? XO? XO. Song number 6, Independence Day. Elliott Smith, very talented singer-songwriter, died very early. Was in his early 30s. Supposedly suicide, although who stabs themselves in the chest to commit suicide? The song is really not about patriotism or United States Independence Day. It's more like a personal thing. I think it's maybe dealing with drugs or relationship or something like that. It's more of a personal Independence Day. Got this for $10, Urban Outfitters clearance rack. They sell a lot of records there. They're usually overpriced and not stuff I usually want. The first time I ever heard Independence Day, that song, was actually by a jazz piano player, Brad Mehldau, if you know him. And I heard it actually in a club in Los Angeles. The first time I saw Brad Mehldau, he played this great tune and said, "This is Independence Day" by Elliott Smith. Several years later, 15, 20 years later, he released it on this record with Chris Teal, who is a mandolin player, kind of a rootsy, country, folky kind of a thing. So this just came out on None Such Records a couple years ago, 2016 maybe. Chris Teal and Brad Mehldau. Brad Mehldau is a creative piano player. He plays a lot of stuff in, obviously, jazz trio format, but he'll do some more unusual stuff like this, piano and mandolin. So I would call it jazz still, but good record. And okay, here's a weird one. Let's go classical. There's a tune on here called 4th of July by Charles Ives. Charles Ives, maybe America's greatest classical composer that most of you have not heard of. He wrote a thing called the Holiday Symphony, and there's 4 different movements. The 3rd one is called 4th of July. I featured Decoration Day a couple weeks ago on Memorial Day, which is what they used to call Decoration Day. Anyway, Charles Ives has a lot of American and patriotic themed stuff in his music, and his father was a Civil War band leader who taught him music. Okay, let's get on to the main event. Jimi Hendrix, Star Spangled Banner. So, a couple thoughts about Jimi. The most iconic, legendary recording of our national anthem happens to be by Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, 1969. Kind of ironic, I guess. And I think that's been released on 2 records. The Woodstock album, which I probably have somewhere. But I just picked this up last week for $1 at a thrift shop. This is soundtrack recordings from the film Jimi Hendrix, released after his death. And this does also contain the same recording of Star Spangled Banner from Woodstock. Even though that's the most famous performance of the Star Spangled Banner ever, I think. If you know one more famous, please tell me. Jimi Hendrix was he was the headliner at Woodstock. He was the last act but he didn't realize by the time he went on stage Monday morning, the crowd was gone. They had mostly dispersed, and a few people were left. About a year later, he did another performance. He did a handful of performances of the Star Spangled Banner. But a year later, he actually performed it on the 4th of July at the Atlanta Pop Festival. I don't think that's on record anywhere. I'm not sure. I couldn't find a recording of it even on YouTube. But at the Atlanta Pop Festival, bigger crowd, everybody was there. Again, Jimi was the headliner. There was more like 500,000 people in the audience, and that concert was maybe a little better organized, but it also kind of annoyed the people of Atlanta and Georgia. And I think they passed a law saying you can't have these ridiculous mega concerts anymore. So that concert sort of was the tail end of the mega pop festivals of the 60s and 70s. Anyway, Jimi Hendrix, iconic recording, Star Spangled Banner. Jimi was kind of a patriotic guy. He was, you could sort of look at his performance as a protest against the Vietnam War. He was a veteran. He served in, was it the Air Force? He tried not to make political statements or racial statements in his music. He was kind of like we're all one big happy family. Everybody peace and love. But Atlanta, when he performed that last song, was kind of racially charged. He was in the Deep South, civil rights movement, and not everybody in Atlanta outside the music world really appreciated what Jimi was laying down. But I appreciate it. Jimi, you're awesome. Forever awesome, Jimi Hendrix. And have a great 4th of July, guys. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the hot dogs. Take it easy. Bye-bye.